Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, the Director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we'll discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue, and finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. This month's topic, we're going to talk about the effects of technology and media on family life, and especially how to utilize it in your families while keeping your kids safe online. And as always, we have a special guest. Will you please introduce yourself?
I'm Greg Schutte, Director of Marriage Works Ohio in Dayton, Ohio, and I've been married for 28 years and the father of 7 children.
All right, Greg. Well, welcome back to the show. You were with us in February of 2021. Talk about Marriage Works and your primary work there. But today we're going to talk about mostly, I guess, about your family life, because we're talking about the effects of media on not just our kids, especially our kids, but we got to protect ourselves from the effects of media as well. Let's start on the positive side, right? What are some of the positive things you might say about what media and technology has done for you and your family these days?
You know, a lot of people are parenting now and they know more about technology. For me, I've always been fighting against it and had to deal with it because it is a part of what we do.
I didn't have that when I was a kid. Why do we do it now?
Computer, what the heck? Yeah, I know. But I think the beauty, especially since me and my wife homeschool, is that it is such a great resource for, the questions that come up, for the stuff that our kids are learning. We pick out subjects and we can really explore it there. We used to do a lot with the library. Now we can do it at home through the computer, through the internet. Of course, you have to watch everything that you're looking because there's a lot of misinformation. But I think it's opened up a lot more doors to really understand life, understand our faith. And I think it's a really great gift in many ways. But just like anything, those things that can be used for good can be used for ill.
Right, exactly. So technologically, right? Social media, what you can do on your handheld phone, even. All this has grown exponentially, really, in the past 10 years. And maybe it's used because of COVID, right? It has done a lot even in this past year. But as we were talking about, some of it is great and some of it's actually quite dangerous, especially for our children. So how is it that we protect our kids from some of the issues online and from social media?
Well, first, we have to get out of the mentality of, well, not my child. My child won't do that. And I've heard that so often where people are just like, and I would love to say, yeah, my kids aren't going to be that way either. But I often say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If you happen to have that one child that finds it and then turns away from that and talks to you, that's great. But a lot of times with the pornography and a lot of the other filth that's out there, it draws you in. There's a natural curiosity that we all have. And it doesn't mean that our child, I think that was the hard part for a lot of parents. And it was a hard part for us when we discovered, one of our kids had found their way into a bad place in the internet, was you start to doubt yourself. You start to think, am I a bad parent? Didn't I train them well? And it's like, no, that's not the point. We have to remember that, especially the realm of pornography doesn't wait for kids to find. It's not that our kids are bad and so they seek that out. A lot of times it finds them. One child had their iPod and we thought, what could they do with an iPod? But they somehow found their way to a bad resource, and that luckily we caught that. So get rid of that attitude of it's not going to happen to me. My kids are good. And it's not that they're bad. There's this natural tendency to be drawn into that.
Right. So be aware. Don't assume it's not going to happen to your kids. Number one. Okay.
The other thing is a few things. We need to be talking to our kids about safety. With our kids, the littler they are, we definitely have restrictions around computer. And I know that they fight us on it because they want to do what they want to do. But we're very clear that, look, when they're younger, we don't go into all the explanations of what's the bad out there, but we start to say, look, not everything is good on here. And part of why we're doing this is to protect you. And as they get older, then it is that discussion of here's some of the things that are actually out there. So some of the things that we do is it's covenant eyes on our computers and on our phones. So when our kids are able to get onto the computer, they have to log in so we can see exactly where they are, what they're doing. With cell phones, when our kids get, and let me just say, we don't give our kids cell phones until they have a job. And even then, we lock down all of the frivolous, getting on the internet, doing all this it's mainly texting, talking. And then my wife has this connection where she can actually see everything that my child is getting on her phone.
Does that have to do with Covenant Eyes, or is that a separate thing?
This is a separate thing that she has. No, Covenant Eyes will report to us where they've been and what they're doing, but for this, and that's more so for the computer at home. But for their cell phone, yeah, we can actually lock down things there. We tell our kids from the beginning, we have full access to read your emails. Again, I see so many parents that are just like, oh, I can't do that. Got to give them their privacy. And I'm thinking, no, we are protectors of our kids. Until they leave our home, until they become an adult, we not only have to teach them boundaries, we need to guide them in that.
And everybody else I've talked to brought up Covenant Eyes as well. I've looked into that. It's a filter as well. As I understand it, it's primarily, if not exclusively, a filter against pornography.
With Covenant Eyes, you can lock things down, but ultimately the kids know that we're going to see it report out. And even now with Covenant Eyes, they give you screenshots. They're blurred out, but you can even see, even if they go to a website that you're like, I don't know what that is, you see anything that looks questionable. And then you can have that conversation with them.
I'm sure there's a combination of things, and I don't want to go on, with this one too much, but I just wonder, like, okay, there's a porn site, for example, that'll be easy enough to block, right? But even if something like I don't even know if they still do this anymore, but the, Sports Illustrated swimsuit of the month, I mean, if you search something like that, that's not going to be a porn site, but is that going to be something that is going to be noticed by Covenant Eyes, for example?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This has just been my experience, is that anything that even looks questionable, it will come up there.
Of course, that and a combination of, your computers in the living room, for example, right?
But I think the other thing to keep in mind for parents is even innocent searches, our kids can find themselves in a bad place. I heard that pornography is one of the biggest businesses out there, multi-billion-dollar business. And it's what they're doing is they're recruiting their next generation of users. And how they do that is they will buy up unused websites. So if, let's say, Marriage Works Ohio, we stop being Marriage Works Ohio and we don't keep up our Marriage Works logo or Trust Marriage, they can grab that and then attach it to a porn site. And so someone who thinks that they're going on there to find marriage could find themselves there. Talk about demonic. They will find names like Cinderella and they'll misspell it by one letter, maybe with an S. And so a kid goes on there to try and look for Cinderella and boom, they find themselves in a very bad place.
Porn site. Yeah.
So again, me and my wife will also, with the younger kids, we will do some of the research with them and then set them up for, you're going to watch this on, about birds. So we don't just let them willy-nilly go through and try and find stuff. Because again, that's when they'll find some of that bad stuff, when they're searching versus us.
Right. Okay, so there you put on a filter on your computers of some sort, keep the computer typically in the family room. You only give your kids a phone with phone purposes, right? Like texting and calling. You don't open that up to a lot of things. What about social media? What would you suggest for, Facebook and such things? There could even be problems with bullying or things going on with social media these days. What do you suggest to work around that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I can say, because I think there's always so much out there. I'd love to say I have a good knowledge of the different ones, but I think if our kids are going to get into Facebook, we have to do the research. Now, I got rid of my Facebook. I'm going to a different online medium for many different reasons, but sometimes you can have your younger kid do something through your own Facebook, so then you can see what's happening. Or if they're on Facebook, I've heard where some parents will say, you have to friend me and I have to be able to see what you're doing. Again, I think that's the biggest thing, is do the research, but don't feel pressured by your kids that they have to have their freedom and their privacy. I think there's some limitations with that when it comes to the internet, because I can tell you, if they know you're looking, if they know that you're seeing that report, it is a nice way of them monitoring themselves. And that's what we want to teach our kids, is getting them thinking about, is this a good place to go? Is this a good place to view? And then when you find that they fall, I've had many conversations with my kids where we sit down and let's talk about this. And let me just go this route. I think often we can do some damage when we find our kid gets involved in pornography and we want to come down on them hard and shame them and make it all this horrible, bad stuff, because ultimately there is some natural part to that. And let me explain. So God created us to find that beauty in one another. And there is beauty in the body. I mean, we know that through the theology of the body. And so there's a naturalness to that, but it's teaching kids the beauty of the body and how it can be used in a shameless way and how it can be used in a sinful way. Those are the conversations we also have to have with our kids so that they don't grow up thinking sex and the naked body is horrible.
Right.
It's just there's a place for that and there's an order to how we do that. And there's things that you shouldn't be doing. The other thing is, as you're guiding your kids and protecting them, you want to prepare them for for us, when kids become 18 and they go into college, we stop. If they ask us to keep up the covenant eyes, we will. And I've had my son and my daughter say, yeah, can you still do that? And we will. But it's preparing them for starting to build their own ways of working through that, finding healing, going to confession, and finding those accountability people in college too. And I think that that's important, because sometimes we feel like we got to watch them forever and ever, and that's
Right.
difficult.
Right. It seems to me that it's getting harder and harder to know in advance, okay, this show I know I can I'm not going to have to sit there and watch every show they watch at the same time. I've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Right. But more and more shows are going to have things that the culture is accepting as good. I mean, the easiest example is homosexuality. That is pushed on children as just another great way to love in ways that might even not picking up on, with rainbows and images of people who you can't tell what gender they are and things like that. So do we just talk to our kids about what's happening? Do we need to look at this in advance and not let them watch it? What are your suggestions with those kinds of things happening on regular television shows these days?
Yeah, well, there's no perfect way to do it. I'll tell you kind of some of the things we've done. One is there's always those moments where in a movie something comes up and you're like, oh,
right,
crud, I didn't expect that. But first and foremost, don't overreact, because if they're younger, a lot of times it goes right over their head. They don't catch it. And so, then it could be one of those, okay, we're not going to watch that anymore. We have some problems with that. And then the kids are like, why? I don't understand. For the longest time, we didn't do The Little Mermaid with our kids for many different reasons. And they wondered and they wondered. But as they got older and they eventually watched it, they're like, yeah, you were spot on that. So at the time, they don't understand. So don't react, because if you react in the moment, sometimes that will draw them into, wait a minute, and they'll catch it. But as they get older, it is going to be important to have those discussions when that does happen. If you can view a movie before them, we try to do some of that. But the other thing is, there are some different, especially Catholic movie guides online. And I know my wife will use those, where she'll get on, she'll look at it, and it will tell you, here's different things that you will see in this. And they're very clear about violence, sexual innuendos, language.
Right. I've seen that. I can't remember exactly what it's called either, but it's easy to find. You put Catholic Parent Guide movies or something, and it will come up. And you can, it's very detailed as far as movies are concerned. What are some of the things, Little Mermaid in particular, that were concerning? Can I ask that?
Well, for one, I think some of the stuff that she wore, she felt was skimpy.
Absolutely. She is about as immodest as you can get in a cartoon character. That's true.
Right. But I think it was more so the message of, you can disobey your parents, you can do all this, get yourself in bad, and still everything ends up good in the end. I think that was the biggest thing that my wife did not like about that, was showing you can go bad and you still end up with good. So that was the bigger message that my wife really struggled with, along with, how she looked. And so, those are the times to then, again, I make it a point to sit with my kids and let's talk about it and how it connects with our faith. Because if we don't, some of that stuff can be taken in another way.
Right. And now it's almost too late now. I didn't look at that early on, but it's such a high percentage of kids' movies, right? Have that theme of the kid totally disobeyed their parents, and it was because the parents were wrong to have that rule on them in the first place. It's
Right.
so common. And I wonder if they've seen way too much of that now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the other one is where they will make the parents look like idiots.
Right.
And this little kid is the one
It's
that's
the
in
smart one.
control. And yeah, and that's another thing, that there's little things that damage. It's just that frog in the pot, little by little. And that's what they're trying to do with, even now with the homosexual content. It's just, let's chip away. I noticed that in one of the Star Wars movies. It went fine. And then at the very end, everybody's congratulating, everything went well. And they shoot one scene, two women kissing, and then they move on. Just enough to put it in there. And, it's how much are we willing to say, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal, before they thrust it all at us. And we're so caught into that. And the other thing with these series, that's the other thing I'm seeing, even in Disney Plus, where they will get you hooked on a series, and you've got to watch and you've got to watch and you've got to watch. And then you get to a point where something happens and you're like, ooh, but I want, and as parents, we want what we want, and we put up with it. But now they're doing a series called WandaVision on Disney. And so my daughter was watching this, and she's 17. I sat down with her. I'm like, well, I'll watch this episode with you because I'm just curious. And she had gone quite a few into it. And then all of a sudden you start to see the Red Witch or the Scarlet Witch, which you think is just some sort of power that she has, all of a sudden starts to fight against a woman who is a full-fledged witch. And again, watch it. It starts to really delve into, this witchcraft. And I'm thinking, okay, so that led to a conversation that we had. And I'm just like, well, I don't think this is best. Yeah, okay, maybe they make her the bad person in this. But ultimately, it's just like, should we let our kids play with a Ouija board? Some people can say, well, now it's a game. Well, yeah, but you open the door for more and more. And that's what you gotta realize as a parent. You either do the hard work of helping guide your kids, or we get lazy and, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that far. Well, every kid has a phone. Well, that's fine. You can do that. But you're going to find that you're going to wake up one day with these kids. I did a talk once for a high school, in a high school auditorium. It was overwhelming on pornography. And I was wondering how it would go. But by the time I got done, you could hear a pin drop. Because when you start to realize what is all involved in pornography, I think a lot of adults, I can't tell you how many people in therapy I see as adults it's just accepted. It's there in their life. It's just, well, I view it here and there, but it's not a big deal. And yet it is totally undermining their marriage. They've done it as a young kid. Nobody has ever guided them in this. And it's destroying our marriages. I've heard it called the Fortification of America, where men are running first to that versus to their relationship with their wife or women. Why? Because it's easy. I don't have to win her over. I don't have to prove anything to her. She gives herself fully to me. With this woman, she may withhold sex from me. She may treat me this way. It's work. And I think that that's something that, if we're not careful in guiding our kids with, here's bad, but here's God's design for sex. Here's God's design for the human body. And this is good. This is bad. And if you find yourself over here, here's some ways to walk through that. So we just need more parents that are actively involved in this. I think this is important.
Okay.
Is just like anything, the world can swallow us up. But if we are working with Christ, if we are centering our family on Christ, if we are giving our kids the tools of faith and showing them the beauty of it and living it out. And this is my challenge to a lot of men. A lot of men aren't living out their faith. And they come home, they're not leading their home in faith. They're leading their home in coming home and playing video games and going off and doing their own thing and going out to bars. And our kids need a guide. Our kids need to know and not be shamed, but to walk this journey with them so that they can turn to us and we can support each other. And that's what I'm training my kids in, is that here's what God wants. Here's the good. They live it. We pray the rosary every day. We go to mass regularly, if not, throughout the week. So it's so much a part of their life that when they find themselves into pornography and they make the mistake, they know it's wrong. But, if we are playing a part in our kids' lives, bringing God to the center of that, having those open communications with them, that we're going to give them more tools and more support to really walk through this and find a way in their own lives to conquer this, or at least to keep fighting it. And I tell this to my kids all the time. The good part is that you're fighting it. Because guess what? We're all fighting. How many of us go to confession every week or every month? And it's like, I've done this again. Oh, I've done this again. Oh, I've done. So God gives us that grace. We have to show our kids that grace and keep them in that. Because if they're fighting, at least they're not like so much of America today where it's just normal. It's not a big deal. It's not hurting anything. That's a scary place to be. So that's my hope in this, is don't be overwhelmed. Have a plan, be involved. Don't be lazy as a parent, and do your homework. And when your kids fall, don't shame them. Don't act like they've just ruined your whole, but have that conversation. And let's talk about, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Can we talk a little bit about screen time, right? You hear almost too scary, right? Things about if a kid just spends too much time in front of a screen, even if what they're watching or doing isn't in of itself a bad thing, that can lead to depression and anxiety and all kinds of issues like that. And then there's so many different devices. For example, we have our family computer, and it's easy enough. You have to log in and you can only have a certain amount of time on that computer. But then there's the television, that there is no login and time thing on that. And then at times one might be on the computer and one might need something, and so they'll borrow my phone or my iPad or something. There's no time on that either. So you have a rule of thumbs on time restrictions, number one. And number two, how is it that you combine screen time, which is easier to limit with programs, and say TV time right on top of that, or borrowing your parents' device for something, right?
Yeah.
Advice on those kinds of things.
Well, our kids have to have a purpose for getting on the computer.
Right.
It's not just we're getting on because we want to waste time. It's not we just getting on because we want to play a game. No, we've never been into that in our family. It's you're either on for a purpose, even if it's a learning purpose, and it can be fun. A lot of our kids get on for what's called typing tutor, where it's a fun little program and it's teaching them how to type, and they have fun while they're doing that. Great. But yes, we set limits. And whenever our kids ask us, sometimes the answer is no, this is not a good time. You need to go do something else. Or yes, you can, but you've got a half an hour. You've got 45 minutes. And, initially you hear them go, well, you don't have to watch it all. Okay, I'll take 45 minutes. And then you hold them to that. You have them set a timer or bring the computer to you once they're done. I find that you're spot on. The longer they're on that, the more it actually just pulls them into more and more. I'm seeing this with a lot of older kids with YouTube. YouTube is set up in such a way that there's short little videos that sucks you into, I got to watch the next, and I got to watch the next, and then I got to find something funny so I can show everybody and be the life of the party. And they're using that to interact versus we need to teach our kids how to use their brain in other ways. One of the things that I've noticed is that it has really killed a lot of creativity in kids. And there's research out there that's showing that kids who are constantly being entertained are losing the ability to be creative, to have that imagination, so for our kids, it's always been, they spend more time outside doing stuff with rocks and sticks and plastic bottles and swimming in the pool and sandbox, because that's where they're developing the ability to have that imagination. I see all the time little kids with iPads. And I think it's fine to use some of these to get you through at different times. You know, you need a break as a parent, you need to take a half an hour nap, and you just sit there and your kid plays a game. But I think too often parents use that as a babysitter, and you got to be careful. So, yes, definitely have those time limits and have them be a part of that. Because if not, let's put it this way, my favorite saying is pay now or you're going to pay much bigger later on.
Right.
Keep that tight rein early on, and then it's easier to say, okay, you can go for an hour versus giving them an hour and a half and saying, nope, we're going to 15 minutes. That's where you get that struggle between, one of the things that I think has been neat for our family to help kids discover is audiobooks. And again, we pick out what those are, audiobooks, and then read alouds. Because the beauty with that is the kids' imaginations have to be there. They're still having an entertainment, but they get to pick the picture of the person versus someone else telling them the way it looks. And I've even noticed right now when the kids go and watch a movie version of it, they're like, we don't like that. It kills our image of what we think with this particular character. So it's interesting. But yeah, if you don't have those time limits, it will suck their time away and it'll keep drawing them deeper and deeper into different things.
Right. Do you have a rule of thumb as to what's an acceptable amount of time, age dependent?
Yeah, definitely age dependent. I think the smaller they are, it should be less time. I'm a bigger stickler. If they're on there for anything besides school, to me, the most I'll ever do is an hour. Because beyond that, then there's other things that are being neglected. And I think that's the other thing. Ultimately, our kids have to have stuff that they're responsible for and doing. And I think there's so many times that they're watching the social media, they're on the computer, they're on their phone because they don't have regular chores. Our kids have chores every day, things that have to be done. On Saturday, we're all pitching in to clean the house. I know a lot of parents that aren't having their kids do that, or they don't do it on a regular basis. And so again, the earlier on that you can do that, I think the better. So I'm a big proponent of, limiting that time that they're on there. I think the biggest message that I'm saying here is you have to participate in the life of your kids. You can't assume that they're going to go in a good direction. You can't assume that you've raised them well and they're not going to make mistakes or find their way into bad places on the computer, or even know that it's bad in the moment that it happens, or be able to stop themselves when it happens. So we have to have a plan, and we have to do it together as parents. The father has to be just as involved as the mother. And there's times when the father has to be the one that's sitting down and talking with their kids. Don't approach things immediately with shame, but with seriousness. This is not good, and these bad things can happen, but really working together on educating them good from bad and how do we plan for this not to happen again. If we're not the one guiding the direction of our kids, the computer and the internet will. That's just what's going to happen. And I've seen it too often with kids.
All right, Greg. Well, you've given us a lot of advice. If we talked about so many things, if I could boil it down to some of the things I'm remembering, not necessarily in this order, have some kind of filtering device. Don't assume that they're just not going to find such things. Certainly have rules and limits that make sense about where the computer is. I can't view it after this time of day. They have to have a reason for being on the computer or on the cell phone or whatever it is. Certainly model the behavior in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Have a relationship with your children so that you can talk about things when they come up. Don't overreact. Don't shame. Just be honest and open about what is going on, and have other things to do. Have chores, have family responsibilities, and all kinds of things that they keep them occupied so that they're not even wanting to spend their entire day using technology and things. And then probably number one, have a family life that is clearly devoted to Christ and given up to the Holy Spirit and led in prayer, so that they're, if nothing else, they certainly have a sense of right and wrong. They are led by the Holy Spirit, by relationship with Christ, which can help keep us on the right track even if we fall.
You're good. That's awesome.
There you go. Pretty good summary of what I think you said, right?
You did well. You remembered better than I did. So.
All right, Greg. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, talking about media and technology and some of the dangers and how it is that we keep ourselves and our kids safe this day and age. So thanks for spending time with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in on this episode of our Being Pro-Life series. Head to the website to view more resources talked about in this episode at www.catholicauc.org/beingprolife. Thanks for joining us today. I look forward to being with you next time.